difficult for me to even really think of them without weeping, to be honest, the whole family. And I first came to Hope Christian Center in 1988. As I sat here today and I ran into some of the men that I've known over the years, I realized that I know men from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. And, so I say that because I wanted to say that almost to feel light about it. And in one way, it's a blessing, and in another way, it's really sad and can create shame for me. But I'm not going to come from that place this evening. I want to come from a place of gratitude because, as Jack said, I think my story more. I hesitate. I don't love the whole testimony thing, and probably because I was such a phony and a liar for so many years, and so many times I kind of told my story and invoked some kind of emotions because some of the things from my early life had some tragedy in them and some sadness, and it can invoke emotion in people, and then yet I was a liar, and I was plotting schemes in my heart whether I even knew it or not. I was so corrupt in every way that I was fooled, even myself, I think, most of all. That's the way I was, and I couldn't seem to come out of that. And when I came in 1988, I was just a young man. I was 21 years old. I came out of a jail in New Jersey. I had been arrested graciously by the Lord. I believe with all my heart. I was transporting cocaine and heroin on my way to Ohio from the Bronx. My mother had just committed suicide 3 months prior to that, and I was really on a suicide mission. And I was 117 pounds when I was arrested, vomiting blood. My father, who was also a heroin addict who I was using with at the time and dealing cocaine with, was even telling me I got to go to the hospital because I'm probably dying. And I wouldn't listen. I said, one more trip and I'll go. And on my way back, I didn't make it. And God spared my life, I believe with all my heart. And I ended up being brought back to the Bronx, ironically, just on the other side of the Bronx. I had no idea that Hope Christian Center existed. And I went in there, and I spent 4 months there. Back at that time, they were an induction center, 14 challenge during those years. And they impacted me. I don't think that, I can't say that the gospel didn't impact me, but I don't think I really it didn't grab a hold of me. Kind of learned something about God, but not really. I was raised, not obviously in church, but did the whole Irish Catholic thing a little bit in the Bronx going up and stuff. So I kind of had a vague knowledge of who God was, but had no idea really. And so I wasn't really deeply impacted. I don't remember a whole lot from the classes back then, but what I do remember is the Roberts family. And they're here. They were just little children here. Angie was maybe 7. Rebecca was maybe 12, and Rocky, I mean, so many. Jesse was just following Jack around. I never heard him speak, but he always followed Jack around, holding on to his knee. I have very vivid memories of that family, and I just knew there was something so different about them I was deeply attracted to. But that wasn't enough, you see. That wasn't enough to keep me. I was impacted by them, so maybe it was enough to make phone calls that keep coming back, though. And so I did, and I went on my way, and I returned to a life of sin after graduating from Teen Challenge and getting the law off my back and finishing the requirements that I had to do for them. And then I went back to serving myself and living the way that I felt like living. And God so graciously kept me, and I didn't die that way. And in the mid-90s, I got married and had a son in 1997. And then I destroyed that woman that I was married to. I didn't destroy her because God has held her up. But I did my best. And she asked me to leave when my son was 10 months old. And I ended up going back to New York City, and from Pennsylvania, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, is where I had lived for 9 years. And I ended up, once again, homeless and on the streets of the Bronx. And I called looking for Jack, name-dropping Jack, I think, to Dave Mapes, but Dave Mace wasn't having that a whole lot. I had to wait it out a little. I ended up not coming in on that. I went and got a job instead and got a manager job and tried to make things happen on my own, and that didn't work out very well for very long. And I ended up coming back in again in the late, maybe 1999, I believe it was. And when I came in this time in 1999, I was really a mess in very different ways. I was 10, 12, 13 years older than I had been. I was now in my early 30s, and having just lost my wife and son, I could not, or I would not deal with that pain. And it just kept I just kept going back out. I could not handle it. I kept running back out the door, coming back and forth. I remember that time, though, even though I did that, there was something, the gospel was really deeply impacting my life, though, differently this time, in the sense that I was hearing things that I knew. I just heard the truth about myself. I remember thinking that so often in Jack's classes, in particular Jack's classes, and in my one-on-one time with him. He would just say things to me that would pierce through my heart, and I would know that I just heard the truth, and it would scare the daylights out of me. But then I would still not respond. Scary. So scary when I think back now. I knew I was hearing the truth then, and I was hardened. I just figured out I could manipulate it just enough to compromise still in some areas of my life that I wouldn't surrender, and I'd go back out. And I remember one of the times that I was there, Jack, on my pity party, probably again about losing my wife and my son, and how I couldn't deal with it. And he just telling me, you have to go through the pain. And at some point, you're going to have to do that. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. But God will take you through it. And I just wouldn't. And so it got so bad that last time around, I did such despicable things in 1999 or maybe early 2000 when I was there that I was asked to leave. At some point, I don't think Jack remembers this, I reminded him of it. He banned me for 10 years. Done. I had a 10-year ban from Hope Christian Stuff. And I left, and I used up every bit of that 10 years, because for 10 more years, I squandered my life away, bouncing from state to state, in and out of institutions, and in and out of prisons, and in and out of jails, and in and out of rehabs, and in and out of relationships, and in and out of people's homes. And finally, I went on the run from Pennsylvania. I had absconded, and Jack had known. I kept up over those years, though, mostly with Pat, and she never gave up, and Jack's so right. I'd always call just to hear a soothing word. I'd always hear the truth from her, but I knew that she kept praying for me. And Jack I'd go to when I wanted to get hit in the head with some truth in a different way. And it was really this self-flagellating side of me. I got that side of my personality. I kind of enjoy that a little bit in some sick way. And I would go to Jack for that usually, because I knew he was going to tell me the truth. Even though I was unresponsive to it, I liked hearing it for some reason. And I thought I wanted to respond, but I just didn't. And that last time I was absconded, I showed up at church out of nowhere. I drove over from Long Island, where I was staying at the time, and hiding out with dyed hair. I thought I was incognito. And I showed up at church, and immediately he made a beeline for me after, and he says, "Are you finished in Pennsylvania with..." And I said, "No." So he knew immediately, and immediately he looked at me and said, "Jimmie, you belong in prison, and you need to go back there and handle that." And I got what I wanted, because I knew that's what he was going to say to me when I told him that. And I said, "I know, Jack." And I meant it. I was there. I knew it. I wanted to hear it because I was already dealing with that. And it took me 10 months. And 10 months later, I was driving along the road, working, driving a coffee truck on the Long Island Expressway in my route. And I was so furious and so full of rage and so full of anger at the world and at God and at women and whatever, literally cursing God at the top of my lungs and banging on the steering wheel and cursing him, literally, F words, up at God. And immediately, it was as if in that moment, he took my heart out and stuck it in my face, and I actually seen it for the first time. And I saw myself for the despicable human being I had always been. And total depravity started making sense to me. The things I had learned 10 years prior, that I was digging into, I was being impacted by, began coming alive to me in that moment. And I just knew. And I started weeping. And I had to pull over because I would have crashed. And I wept for 20 minutes or so on the Long Island Expressway, repenting and crying out to God and asking Him to forgive me, because I really knew what I was in that moment. And I remember thinking, no audible voice, nothing like that, but I remember thinking, what do I do? I was saying, what do I do? And Jack's voice and the Lord really, you know the first order of business that you need to handle. And by the grace of God, I did. In less than a week later, I boarded a bus from New York City with my suitcase and went back to Pennsylvania, and I walked into the probation department and I turned myself in. And when they put the handcuffs on me, the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. And I went in with the intent of, I am not going to come out of here the same. I don't care if it takes every day of the 5 years that I expected to do when I walked in there. I'm not coming out the same. I know that God is going to transform my life. And He did, and He gets all the glory. I just showed up, and while I was there, Pat, and this is, I wrote about this, she sent me the ESV Study Bible, Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, and Portable Seminary by David Horton. And I literally just devoured these books, particularly the Grudem's Systematic Theology. I could not get enough. And I just would read a quarter of a page or a half a page and sit there for hours and just contemplate and try to wrap my mind around the things that God was speaking into my spirit. And I would think back on the things I heard in Jack's classes, or Bob when he would teach at Hope, at Coming Into Hope, or at Bronx Household of Faith. And all of those things, so many things came back to my memory of what I had heard at Hope Christian Center. And just those seeds of life that were just dropped in there back then, dead, seemingly dead in my heart, started to come to life. Jack's words echoing. I remember when he said this, I understand now, and it was such an exciting time for me in that prison cell. And I was never bored. I never regretted turning myself in. I was never upset about being there. I was so grateful that God had given me that time. And so grateful to the Roberts family and to Hope Christian Center and what it had meant in my life. And so, by the grace of God, I still only did 2 years. I still got grace after all I had done. And I came out, and I had to finish doing some things in the street for a while, and not long after, I relocated down to Alabama and got involved with a ministry. I called my friend Earl here. When he was going out, I had a brief run again. I wasn't doing so great. I started to compromise in some areas of my life again. I didn't go real deep, but I started to play those games again, and I got really fearful because I knew that God had really changed my life. And I called Earl immediately, and I said, Earl, I got to get out of here. I'm in a bad place, bad situation. I got to just get out of where I'm at right now. And so I said, listen, can I come back? And he said, I know a guy down in Alabama, and he said, I think you'd be a good fit down there. And so Earl sent me down to Alabama, and I just started volunteering there in the back office, answering phones, doing whatever they needed, working at a restaurant at night to make some money. And things kind of just grew from there. And I started to just grow more there. And so now I met my beautiful wife, Crystal, while I was there. She works for this same ministry down there as well, and she's the director of the Women and Children's Home there, and I'm now the director of the Men's Home down there, and it's been a tremendous blessing. But when I think back, I get really ashamed. I don't know how to tell my story. I don't like to tell it. It just seems so confusing. There's no one moment, even though I feel like on the highway, I feel like God really I believe that's when I was saved, but I don't know. All those years and all that in and out and all that truth, I'm not sure exactly how all that fits together, to be honest. But I know that God has been faithful to me. I know that He persevered with me long after I deserved it. Not that I ever did. And that's what I'm grateful for. And I know that now that I'm able to kind of rein in all of that experience, and the one thing for sure that it has taught me is similar to what Jack learned from Pat with my situation, is that it's not up to me. So when I'm dealing with men every day and I have no idea what's going on, and I want to quit sometimes because there's so much more of failure seemingly than there is success, and there's so much more heartache than there is joy, I just remember my own story. And I say, how dare you get discuss it? I get impatient with people, Jack. Can you believe that? How dare I? I want to quit on people. And it allows me to just remember that at least I can draw from that and go, you know what? I don't know how, but somehow God brought me through. And I just want to thank Hope Christian Center, because it was really at Hope. It is the gospel. It is the spoken word and truth of the gospel that transforms lives. That's it. It's really that simple. That's what it comes down to. And for me, I seem like I was stuck for so many years in Romans 7. I always loved that passage of Scripture, the things I don't want to do, I keep doing. Oh, yeah, I can identify with that. And I stayed there. For 20 years, 25 years, I stayed there. And never got to 2 Corinthians 12:9. When Paul asked God to remove that thorn and said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And that's what I hold on to today. I just try to remember that I'm weak. No matter what my day is like, that's what I really am, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Only He enables me to be able to continue to move forward with my life and to be of any value whatsoever to anybody. And I just want to glorify God for that. Thank you.